Identity at the Center.
Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff, how are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
Happy anniversary.
400 episodes of Identity at the Center.
Pretty crazy. That's 400. I wouldn't say 400 weeks, right? It's probably close. I mean, there were a lot of weeks where we did more than one episode, but 6.5 years, 400 episodes. I think we're ahead of pace.
Yeah. It's been a crazy, wild ride. I think what we're going to do today is kind of talk about that journey that the podcast has been on and the growth we've seen, and then maybe talk through like some trends. But I guess to kick down the fourth wall that I like to do at least is this is actually the first episode you and I are recording together that is like a non-sponsored thing in the year 2026. So we had some episodes that were recorded in December while we were at Gartner. We did the majority rules game show with Becky there, which was awesome. And Gartner let us release it, which is even more amazing. So there's proof that we were there. And yeah, here we are. I guess when this goes live, it'll be February something. Happy New Year. Merry Christmas. How was your holiday break? All that stuff.
It was good, and I've got a few New Year's resolutions that I've always kind of been the kind of person who doesn't do New Year's resolutions. There's been something that's been eating at me for a while, which is I wanted to write a book about identity. And the more I thought about it, I didn't want to write just another identity book, which I don't even know what that means, right? But I looked at like a book that a lot of people would write, say like an Eve Mailer would write. It's like, I can't do that. I can't. Like, that's not, even if I wanted to do that, I couldn't do it. But I do feel like I've got a creative mind and I've got a lot of experience doing identity over the past 20 years. And so I am writing a book of short stories from the lens of identity practitioners doing identity stuff in the trenches. And what I'm doing is kind of a mix of telling the identity story, but also telling the story a little bit about the people and the interactions and like what's happening to them. So I don't want to give too much away, and the book's not really written yet, but I've made tremendous progress on it. It's going to happen here in 2026.
How many pictures can I expect in it?
I don't know. Really, it's not a kindergarten or under book. No, it might not have any pictures.
Okay. Well, when you let me know about this a couple days ago, I kind of mentioned it sounded a little bit like kind of like the Phoenix Project. Was that a fair kind of comparison, or?
I mean, yeah, that's a lot of first-hand accounts of things that have already happened. So that's kind of the point of view of the storyteller. One thing that I'm doing is trying to trade off between mentor and a mentee, or an advisor and an advisee situation. So I'll run through like a scenario where a breach has recently taken place, and two people who are involved in the breach in some way, but somebody who has kind of more perspective of having, a 30-year career and, looking at it differently than the person who maybe was on the front lines in his more early career and like thinking like, great, I was on the fast track and now all of a sudden, like I've blown it. So that's just an example of one story. There's another story I'm working on where the setting is they are preparing for, I don't say the Olympic Games, I just say the games, but the kind of setting is like a major event where the whole world has eyeballs on this thing. And could you imagine being responsible for the identity rollout, maybe the biometrics, the idea of like taking some kind of cutting edge technologies, like using biometrics for making purchases and entering at the gate, like things that have been done, but doing it at that kind of scale. So a lot of cool backdrops for these stories, but then I also try to weave in, a little bit of education. So it's kind of like this podcast, right? We always think of ourselves as like edutainment, like partially education, partially entertainment. And so the idea behind the book is really the same kind of approach.
So take me through your process here, because Jim, I love you, man. You're one of my best friends, but I've seen you type. And based on what I know of your typing, this book might come out in a decade.
No, that's a good point. Well, first off, I think my typing has gotten a lot better, and there's voice recognition software. That helps. But I mean, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't using AI for help. My approach with using AI for the book is kind of like I use AI for everything. I explain everything that's in my head to the prompt, to the AI, and then it comes back with ideas. And the one thing I am critical of AI right now in 2026 is that it pretty much agrees with everything I say. Every idea I have is like the most awesome idea that's ever been heard. I should say that's what happens like 99% of the time. Sometimes it does give me some feedback, which is good critical feedback, but it does a really good job of like, okay, with what you've given me, now I'm going to do my best to output this thing. And then it's a lot more iterations than I expected. I expected like, hey, I gave you, a full page of like, here's my thought, right? And I'm looking for a 10-page short story. And then like, how did you miss by that much? Right. So that there is a lot more corrective, or it's kind of like you're talking to another person. Obviously, I think most people who are listening to this podcast have done enough AI to know what I'm talking about, right? It's just a back and forth. And I don't know, Jeff, I think it's just like so entertaining for me to go through this process. That's been the biggest surprise so far, is that I kind of had this idea for a long time and I kept putting it off because I thought it was going to be kind of dreadful to sit there and write a book. Like, who the heck wants to write 100 pages of anything? Well, the approach in using AI has been a lot of fun.
It sounds interesting. Are you going to do an audiobook version of it? Be you, speaking into the microphone and reading, being the characters in it and the different voices? Because I would pay extra for that.
I think the only way I wind up doing an audiobook is with AI. So in other words, I'll teach you on my voice. Now you read the thing. But if it sounds too mechanical or too robotic, that wouldn't work. I have another friend who published a book recently, put it on Amazon. So I'm going to learn a lot from him in terms of like, how did he approach that? But, you can self-publish books now without, having to get a contract or anything. And, I think this will be popular within our circle, like the identity practitioner circle, but I don't see this being a New York Times bestseller.
Hey, you never know. Get it out. Maybe you want to sponsor an episode of the podcast and, promote the book, right? Things like that.
Well, hopefully I don't have to sponsor an episode.
We'll take it under consideration. I'll talk with management.
Yeah, right. There you go.
That's pretty exciting, though, writing a book. So that's a New Year's resolution. Does that mean then sometime this year is you thinking you'll be done with it and it's kind of like out there for people to enjoy?
My goal is by one of the conferences this summer to say it's launched, maybe to even have a few printed copies available that, if people are interested in buying it. I'm assuming it's going to cost me enough money to produce it that I'm not just going to want to give them away. But we'll see. I'd like to be able to give them away, but that's kind of the timing that I'm thinking about, is like, around the conferences, May, June timeframe.
Yeah. So we'll have EIC in Berlin in May, and then Identiverse in Las Vegas in June. Can turn our podcast recordings that we do there into /book signing for you, Jim.
Exactly. Yeah. Maybe I'll have to get a little booth or something, but I don't think it's going to be that popular.
A line out the door.
I think the way we went, like, we're sitting here today at like 1.5 million downloads, which is mind blowing that our podcast, people have listened to us that many times, and we do LinkedIn. We don't do really, for the most part, any other social media. We tried like X for a while. We tried, what was the other one? It was
Blue
like
Sky and Instagram. It's just,
no,
it's
what
too
was
much
the
for me
one
to
that
keep up.
people got sick of X, right? They got sick of
Yeah.
Elon, so then everybody went over to this other one,
Blue Sky or Mastodon. Yeah,
Mastodon.
Mastodon was one. Yeah, which is another decentralized, thing. I think Blue Sky is kind of taken over kind of that
Okay.
role, but it's just too much, man. I can't keep up with it. So
Yeah,
it's LinkedIn and YouTube and the podcast platform and the audio
Well, what I was
side.
going
And
to say
that's
is
it.
it's been word of mouth. I mean, I think that's the biggest thing is word of mouth and people telling people. So if you're listening, I think probably other than listening, which we highly appreciate, if there's something you want to do to help the podcast, it's tell a friend, or as Jeff likes to say at the end of episodes, tell a friend, tell an enemy. We don't care as long as they listen.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So I think the book is going to spread that way too. I mean, that would be a sign of success.
Yeah, that'd be a nice little bonus for it. 1.5 million downloads to date. We've been doing this for it's called almost 7 years. Kind of June, July is sort of like our birthday, kind of officially. I was looking back over the stats, and in 2019 we put out 26 episodes for a total of 2,374 downloads, with an average download per episode of 91. And I'm pretty sure I was probably 80 or 90 of those for each episode, making sure things were working and trying stuff like that. And, it's just been growth since there. Last year alone, this is absolutely mind-boggling. We did almost 1 million downloads just in 2025.
It's crazy. It's really crazy.
Yeah. So thank you so much to everyone who has supported. There's a ton of, listeners and super fans and folks that we meet at conferences, and we kind of talked, okay, we name names. It's well, we're inevitably going to miss somebody that we mean to include. And so we just decided we'll just leave a general thank you to everybody. I think people know who they are and really appreciate it. And, the conferences have been a big thing for us, going to places like Identiverse and Gartner and FIDO and, now EIC for the first time last year. And again, this year, I think that's where people have really kind of discovered us, because I'm always curious, hey, how did you hear about this thing? Because we don't do any advertising. It's either me on LinkedIn posting a new episode, or maybe the YouTube algorithm, which we started video maybe, is that about a year and a half already now, or maybe 2 years even. Which is still growing, right? That's still kind of our very, very much a minority platform. 99% of the people who listen are listeners. They don't really watch on YouTube, but that's probably better for their eyeballs. They don't have to see these faces.
No, I think it's the format is probably lends itself better to audio. You're off for your walk or on the car ride to work, you just play the audio. I totally agree with you about not naming names, because you're invariably going to leave someone out. But there's one name I do want to mention, and it goes back to episode 7. You probably know who I'm talking about. Luis Almeida.
Yep.
Dear friend of both of ours, passed away right after the new year.
Yeah. A lot of kind of outpouring of support on LinkedIn, I noticed. And, we worked with him at Identropy a very long time ago, it feels like. But we've all, that whole team has really kind of stayed together, right? That's how Jim and I met. We're working through Identropy. So Luis was just awesome. And it's a shame that we lost him so soon, but it's nice to see the outpouring. You just kind of wish it would happen while people were still alive.
I know. That's the truth. And he's somebody that we'll always remember. And like I said, he was on episode 7, episode 78, and episode 164. So folks are interested in going out. By the way, in case you ever wonder, how do we remember what episodes specific people were on? Go to our website, idacpodcast.com. There's a tab for listen, and there's a search bar that works as good as any search bar. I mean, this thing's on the level of Google.
Let's not go crazy. It's very simple. Just type in a couple words, it'll find anything in the description or the titles. But
no, it's not at the Google level, but it's pretty darn good. So, as having done IT projects for over 20 years, I remember some really bad search bars over time. If you misspell something, forget it. It was not finding it.
Yeah. I can think of a couple of enterprise tools that you and I use in our day job It's very much like that. That's just an
Yeah.
absolute mess. And you'd think we would have that, those types of solutions would have solved for that already. But clearly there is an area for improvement.
Definitely. So how about your new year? I mean, how is it off to a good start?
Yeah. I mean, after Gartner, I basically shut it down for a few weeks. Came home, adopted a puppy. So we now have Pepper joining our pack here. So now we are officially outnumbered again in the house. 3 dogs to 2 humans. We imported her from Tennessee, a couple hours away. My wife went and picked her up and brought her home, and that has basically consumed our entire life for the last, I guess, month and a half now. So I would like to say it was a fun and great Christmas kind of holiday New Year break, but I do not feel rested because there was a lot of 1 a.m., 3 a.m., 5 a.m., 7 a.m. walk outside. Let's try to get the housebreaking done and things like that. But she has taken
Every
very
once in a
well.
while, step in a pile of poop or what, or a wet spot on the hardwood floor.
Yep. Yeah. She's been pretty good though. So, I think part of that is just us being diligent, or a couple mistakes, here and there. But I can tell you, it was some days we got really lucky, sort of like when we first brought her home, because the weather here in Asheville, North Carolina was relatively mild. And so it wasn't too bad. And then the freezing temps kind of came, and when you're out at 3:00 in the morning, in the side of a mountain, and the wind is whipping. We had gusts here from 30, 35, 40 miles an hour, and that's whipping, through, and it's cold. It's like, all right, do your business. We need to get inside. This is not fun.
Yeah.
But
no,
so far so good.
You are quite the dad.
Well, that's, those are our kids in our house, but yeah.
Yeah. One of the things we talked about doing during this episode, we obviously wanted to talk about the conferences, and just to let people know, because I think this is one of the things that it's kind of a service that we do, and we've been doing it for a long time, is we always ask the conferences to give us a conference discount code. We'll publish, right? We don't ask them to pay us to do that or anything. We just do it as a service to our listeners. And we always insist, don't give us a discount code unless it's the best one, because there was an instance, I'm not going to try to pinpoint who it was, gave us a discount code. And then I got an email a couple of days later where it was like, oh, here's this other organization's discount code, and it was like 5% better than ours. I'm like, what the heck? We've been telling people here's a 20%, and now here's a 25%. That doesn't fly. So, at least we get verbal guarantees that yes, these are going to be the best available.
Yeah. And that's great for conferences to want to partner with us and do that. I think, we bring a lot of fun, I think, to conferences. We've done our game show there, Majority Rules, a couple places. We have FIDO. We do, FIDO Few, which was a lot of fun. And, we try to do something different and try to make it more entertaining. And if we can somehow use that to save people money, awesome. That's a win for everybody.
Yeah. I also feel like, the conference attendance being there has helped people become aware of the show. And then I think, it's been great for us. I love going there. I love recording episodes, having a little bit of a different background or a little bit different of an environment. Plus you get a break from, the day to day, and, you get your guests are in the same position where they're not feeling the pressure of checking their email box all the time. So, I think the whole thing is fun. The other thing that we wanted to do is kind of reflect on some of the highlights that we've had over the years. What are some of the best lessons learned? Without putting a number on it, over the 400 episodes of interviewing, what's one of the things that you've learned about either being a guest? I feel like one of the things I've noticed about you, so you don't have to answer this way. You can give whatever answer you want. One of the things I've seen about Jeff Stedman over 6.5 years, 400 episodes, is you've become the MC. You just are good at that. I'm not saying you weren't good at it in the beginning, but you've definitely gotten better over time. Do you feel that?
First of all, thank you. Checks in the mail. I will buy a book. Yeah, I think so. Look, it comes with anything else that you practice and do enough. When we first started this podcast, had no really public speaking experience and didn't really expect it to do anywhere near the numbers that we're doing now for sure. But I think you get more comfortable in front of it. I will say, I've had people ask me, hey, why don't you present at a conference, right? Or something like that. I don't really want to do that. I am much more comfortable being sort of like that MC or moderator type role or, have a little fun, things like that. So I don't think I have anything original to say or groundbreaking to like, oh, here's the next big thing in identity. Like, no, I want to have fun and entertain. And I think, I've had more practice on it. Am I perfect? No, but I think I'm good enough and I'm happy with that. And like anything else, I'll keep continuing to get better at it as I stumble over my words, trying to say that. So, look, you and I have done this 400 times at least. We have thousands of hours at this point of audio. And so if you listen to episode 1, it sounds like episode 1. You listen to this episode, it's going to sound more polished, more natural. The quality is going to be better on pretty much every front, right? Things like that. The only way you get to that is by doing episodes 2 to 399. And really the same comes through knowledge in any space, right? If you're a basketball player, you shoot free throws unless you're Shaq until you're good at them, right? If you're a quarterback, you're throwing balls into tires and, name the profession, and identity is another one of those. Is like you have to stay on top of it and keep doing it. And, podcasting is no different. It's just presenting and, just continuing to kind of develop your own voice.
Yeah. So I was thinking one of the things I've learned about doing interviews, and every once in a while, and like you said earlier, like you might cover the show, I might cover the show. Ideal scenario is where we're both here. But one of the things that I've learned is I know it's not that I like to hear myself speak. It's just that I feel like, oh, I just said something. Now I need to explain what I just said. And then I say it and then I'm like, oh, further explanation. That's kind of like my natural way of being. But I found that sometimes it's better just to ask the open-ended question and then shut up, especially if the guest is kind of like able to work within that framework. And so I found being a good interviewer is sometimes just asking a question and then letting the person answer it. But I will say, so one of the things with the podcast is like sometimes we have CEOs on, sometimes we have very technical people. And I think we aim for some level of consistency, right? So I think we've gotten better at kind of organizing things and preparing our guests like, hey, a good answer goes something like 2 minutes, 2 to 3 minutes. And then, let us ask some follow-up questions and stuff like that. And it's knowing when to interrupt. And it's not, I think we both try to avoid interrupting people, but sometimes you're throwing them a lifeline by interrupting, right? Like they just are to the point where they're afraid to stop talking because then you're going to have that moment of silence where it's like an uncomfortable silence.
I think that's a natural reaction. Is I think people think that you can't have dead air, and I think it goes back to like the radio days. Is like dead air is the enemy. I can't have that. Look, people will talk. People have stories to share. I'm very fortunate to be able to have those conversations with all these people that we've met over the years, and I'll kick down the fourth wall here. And I'm sure we have a lot of people listening who have been guests on this episode and they kind of know what the process is that we go through to like do guest prep and kind of get things going. But, to that point of like long answers, one of the things on our, pre-record checklist is have something to drink nearby because I know you, and, we have like 17 things on this checklist and I'm looking at it right now. And they are all there because of a real life thing that has happened. That's like, okay, we've got to like add that to our thing to make sure that, not only us, right, as the people on the show, but anyone who comes on the show knows like when and what to expect. So have something to drink nearby because we've had situation where somebody talked for like 5 minutes and, their throat was basically gone at the 4-minute mark. And they just kind of kept plowing on through it rather than, taking a break and allowing like the conversation to breathe and take a sip of water and stuff like that. So, I think being able to ask questions and let the person answer is is super important for everybody. It's not just podcast, right? You're talking to anybody, you're asking a question, listen. Don't just ask a question and then immediately have your next thought ready to go, right? Be in the conversation, be dynamic, be part of it. I think that's something that, I think myself, I'm sure a lot of people also struggle with. It's like, you just want to get to the next point. It's like, no. I just asked a question. Let me think about that and react to it rather than just waiting for my next turn to speak. That makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not only that, that kind of triggered a memory for me, which was we had a guest who I thought was going to be a fantastic speaker. So where I came up with this was, you can over prepare. You can write like the full sentence of the question you want to ask, or to your point, you can be listening and not really listening. You're hearing the words and you're thinking about what you're going to say. Those are both terrible things. Sometimes the guests over prepare too. And it's like, I remember one episode, and if you want to try and figure it out, there's 400 episodes out there. Listen to all of them and you'll figure it out. But
and while you're listening to them, hit the like button.
Yeah, hit the like.
All 400.
5 stars for all of them.
Yeah.
This poor guest basically read notes the entire episode, and it was like, oh my God. Like, do we re-record this thing? And we didn't, but we always say to people, it's a presentation. It's not a presentation. It's a discussion, and we have to be in the discussion as well. We can't expect that person to be in the discussion. And we're just reading questions from a sheet of paper.
Yeah. Look, you're only talking to 1 million people a year, so don't be nervous. I get it, right? Some people are comfortable with that, some people aren't. I mean, there's been times where, we'll go through a prep session and I'll send you a message like, oh, I don't know how this is going to go. And then, the light kicks on, the star happens, whatever, and the guest is awesome, right? It's like, oh, okay. I didn't have to worry about anything. that
does happen. I mean, So the opposite also happens. So you have the scenario that you described. So you do the prep session, then you go to record, and the person is way better in the recording than they were on the prep. In the prep, they weren't really paying attention, or their camera had a big thumbprint on it or something.
Let's just say they didn't inspire confidence that it was going to be a good conversation.
Yeah, exactly. But you also have the opposite, where the prep session goes great, and then you get to the session. Now, one of the things I've found is, technology issues can be the worst. I remember one episode where we were recording with somebody, and it wasn't even their internet bandwidth. I think their hard drive was so full, and what do you call it? Like, there's that software that kind of like makes all your files whole again. But fragmentation. So if their drive was probably full and fragmented, and it couldn't save the video, and their computer kept crashing. It crashed like 5 times during the episode, and somehow you were able to save it and make a decent episode out of it. I don't know how, but we've had a few times where things like that have happened.
It still happens. I mean, there was an episode recently where we had a guest crash a few times throughout it. I challenge you to find where that happened, because I've gotten so much better at editing and hiding that kind of stuff. Look, we're remote, we're doing recording. Technology is always going to be an issue, and we've got a pretty stable platform here that we're using, but things happen, and we'll deal with it. It's fine.
Yeah,
it's the meme, right? Everything's on fire around me. This is fine.
I think with the podcast too, it's like we've been talking about the early days, and I'd love to. One of the things we've prepared today was to kind of go through and what was a major theme for each year since we started the podcast. But I think back to those early days, and literally we were recording Teams meetings. Like, we would just save the audio
Zoom,
recording of a Teams meeting or Zoom or something like that. And
pre-pandemic Zoom. If that helps you gauge the quality of how things were working.
Yeah, and just think about it. It's like very internet dependent. If your internet was choppy that day, your episode's not very good. And if you have a guest on, now you're talking about 3 people to have decent Wi-Fi connections for the entire episode to get decent recording. And Yeah, it's actually for us to look back and say, yeah, we only got 100 downloads. It's a tough thing to even wrap my brain around why when our audio quality was what it was, that we would get anybody who'd want to download it.
Well, let's go back year by year, because I think the strength of our show has always been the content, right? The quality, I think, is in a good enough spot, where we sound good enough, right?
Yeah.
And we look slightly worse than that, but still good enough for YouTube. 2019, the year of foundations, really. It was like strategy and frameworks. Our first episode was introduction to an IAM strategy framework. And of the, 26 episodes I think we put out that year, that was sort of like the theme, was like a lot of conversations around strategy and how do you build a program and how do you set that kind of stuff up and what are people should be thinking about, right? The people and the process side of things. And so, those are the episodes that, listeners seem to gravitate, even way back when in 2019.
Yeah. I wanted to mention one other thing. Or two other things. One is the name of the podcast. So we've never changed the name of the podcast. I feel like there's a bit of luck there. Like Identity at the Center was kind of a philosophy that we were at Identity, we were all working on. And the idea being that identity is at the center of cybersecurity. There's all these cyber tools that are in the environment, including, SIM and logging and access management, and they all depend on an identity. If you don't have the identity, the power of those tools is not that great. And well, that's the way the industry has gone. Like now all these cyber tools are becoming identity dependent, and with that dependency they become so much more useful. So the name, a little bit of luck, because like the industry put it, made it so perfect. And I think the thing is we've trademarked Identity at the Center. If we hadn't, I bet there'd be an Identity at the Center conference, or
it would be a theme at a conference for sure. And I have certainly noticed a few conferences really stretching like the theme of identity, and sorry, man, Identity Center's taken, and they had to come up with an alternative.
Identity at the middle.
Right.
Yeah. So that
kudos for us for being trendsetters and ahead of our times. But yeah.
Yeah. The other thing is, people ask me a lot, I'm sure they ask you, well, how did you start this thing? Or why did you start the podcast? And I always just tell the truth, which is kind of like not the most glamorous story. I remember you saying, because you and I were working together on client work every day, right? So you and I would talk every day, and we'd have these really cool identity conversations. As the industry was moving and we're moving with it, where our thoughts are evolving, and we're having these conversations and kind of testing each other's limits on various topics, right? And you would say, we should record this and make a podcast. And I was thinking, I don't know about that. I'm pretty busy. I'm pretty busy, man. And then I think one day you just said it again. I was like, fine, let's do it. And then we recorded an episode, and then we record the next one the next week, and the next one the week. Actually, I think week 2, I wasn't available. You recorded with Fletcher.
Yep.
Fletcher Eddington.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you and I have both been on most of them, probably of the 400, we probably made 385 each or something like that. But we've recorded an episode every week, at least one episode per week, except the 2 weeks at the end of the year. Since
and I always argue for, give me another week, man, and you always talk me out of it.
It's true.
Get back into that editing cave, nerd, and put out another episode.
Well, I always give you the option. We can record every day the first week of December, and we can have a whole bunch of episodes build up, but that's also not realistic. So we do take a break, and I think partly that break makes sense because not only do we need a break, but our listeners probably are spending time with their family. How dare they? How dare they do that?
We're your family. We're your identity family.
Identifam.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really how it started was, it was Jeff's idea. We should record a podcast. And my brave soul saying, okay, let's do it.
And neither of us liking our voice, but just plowing through it anyway. So,
oh, yeah.
that's how it started.
That hasn't changed in
nobody does.
years.
Yeah. So that was 2019. It was like strategy frameworks. 2020 became more of like career growth and like certifications and really kind of like, okay, how do we make this IAM an actual career, right? So this was pre CID Pro from ID Pro. Like that certification didn't exist. We did a really popular episode with the Identity Management Institute, Henry Bagdasarian. Hopefully I got the name right. That was all about different IAM certifications that they had. They were one of the leaders in that space, one of the early movers. So like a lot of the content that people seem to gravitate were, how do I become certified in this thing called identity and access management? I don't even think digital identity was like a thing then. It was just, I'm an IAM or IDM, something like that. Yeah. And, pandemic, I think, was kind of hitting somewhere around that time too. And a lot of disruptions and, were taking place with that. But like that.
Yeah, we were starting to get a lot of downloads. And then the pandemic hit hard where they said to everybody in the world, stop coming to the office. People stopped listening to the podcast in their car. And it was like, oh, now we're back down to like 65 listens per episode.
I don't have time to listen to a podcast. I got to find toilet paper, man. That was 2020.
A total aside, but I remember right after the world started going to shit.
The second swear ever made on this show. Yeah,
I know. Right there. Well, you can bleep me out. That was my first one. I think the other one was you.
So, no, first one was a privileged access management episode that we did several years back, and our guest asked if she could swear. And I said, sure, jokingly. And then she swore. I was like, whoa.
Whoa, this is a family-friendly show. Yeah. So anyway, I see this adult man. Was a neighbor of mine, adult man and his wife, and they had 6 gallons of milk. They had no children. I'm thinking, what are you going to do with 6 gallons of milk? Aren't you lactose intolerant?
It's the new currency for 2020 was, the barter system.
It was. But I think that's the exact theme that we had that year because, it's really weird. I think back in that time, the mantra was there's more demand for people than there are people. So it was like, hey, folks, you're having a hard time finding a job that has meaning to you. Well, the water's warm over here. Jump in. And then I remember at Identitropy, we had something going where, do you remember a lady named Elaine? And she had brought in a bunch of very junior people into the company and they were like learning the trade.
Yeah.
And we had a few of them on the show, I think. So that was the reason I said that was kind of funny is because now we're all worried that AI is going to take our jobs and that the next generation, like nobody's hiring new people.
Well, we had some of those folks. We actually did a Family Feud episode like way back then as well. We did it at a company meeting for Identitropy, and you ran this very complex set of PowerPoint slides that I had found to use as like the game, and I sort of emceed that point of it. And some of the answers that we got from our own companies, like identity professionals, and I'm putting that in quotation marks, were very suspect.
Yeah,
but yeah, it was an interesting time.
Yeah. Name your favorite privileged access management platform.
And Kanye West. I remember somebody just said Kanye West as like an answer. I was like, what?
That had to be Fletcher.
It might have been, but it was a lot of fun. And I think that's what's like, all right, like we got to figure out how to do this better sometime in the future. And, fortunately we were able to work something out with FIDO Alliance and, that whole thing was
FIDO Feud, baby.
FIDO Feud. That's, yep. So yeah, let's see. So 2020 was like certifications and like professionalizing IAM. 2021 was really about like cloud stuff, cloud identity. I think there was a lot of people still figuring out how to things like AWS, work. How are we managing permissions in Azure and GCP and all the different cloud environments that were out there? So there was like a lot of content that was around managing identity in the cloud. And our top episode that year was episode 101, AWS Cognito and CID Pro. We did that with Who did we do that with? I have to look and see. Sarah, I think it was.
Yeah. That was like the most popular episode for like years, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, people were interested in, what is this thing called, cognito. So people were trying to figure that out. And then, it was just Sarah Cicchetti. Sorry, Sarah. Apologize. Yeah. And then the CID Pro certification was just being launched kind of around that time too. And obviously, ID Pro has been such a big part of this show, right? We're the official podcast for that. idpro.org. Go sign up, be a member, just like Jim and I. But that was a very popular episode because it kind of blended a couple things. It was the need to certify talent, right? To demonstrate we've got certification in space, just like other parts of information security. And then also this crazy idea of like, I am in the cloud. Like, what does that even mean?
Well, that's it. I mean, I think organizations that had traditionally had on-prem infrastructure were en masse moving that infrastructure to the cloud. I kind of remember in the beginning of the cloud, it was like, oh yeah, we're just running some dev servers there. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh no, we're doing DevOps for our production pipeline to AWS. And it's like, oh, wow, that happened pretty quick. And now the identity practitioner needed to get their arms around it. Man, I can't believe that was all happening, underway while the podcast was running, but it does make sense. And now we're in like another era where you see AI, the big AI wave coming to potentially replace a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah. We're going to talk about 2026, but I'm going to keep the years rolling here. So if 2021 was the year of cloud, right, for an identity standpoint, 2022 was really about the year of governance. So there was a lot of like process and compliance type things, and IGA was certainly part of that. We did an episode with Paul Mazzara, episode 190, which was around identity governance. That was like our most popular episode that year. And so the assumption was at that point was like, oh, okay, programs are starting to figure it out. We're starting to get our handle on our people and this being a career. And, now we've got this, we've had to manage cloud permissions because that was like, oh, we've got to figure that out like right now. It's happening. Let's take a step back and make sure that permissions across the board are being governed, right? So kind of like the space of identity governance and administration, right? So players in that kind of space. So kind of interesting to see 2022 kind of clean up the work that was done in 2021, which is
it's definitely about
real
cleaning
life.
up. It's definitely about cleaning up. It was, a lot of organizations moved quickly during COVID to open things up. But I think overall, it also opened a lot of eyes to like, here's the gaps that we have in terms of our preventative processes to make sure that people have the right access. And I think one of the things that we were the voice for was, folks, now's the time to do this, because if you wait and you find yourself in 2025, 2026, you're going to be way behind the curve, because now what you're seeing happening is this kind of real-time intelligence where identity and signals are kind of becoming where, organizations have the opportunity to get ahead of threats. But the thing is of like, you're still fighting the war of like, hey, we're trying to get IGA in the door. Man, you're way behind. And so hopefully your organization, if you're listening, you've taken care of this. But that was one of the times where I think we were kind of ringing the alarm, like, now's the time to do this. And by the way, I did want to say one thing about Paul Mazzara. So Paul's now at Gartner. We probably won't get Paul back on the show until he retires or Gartner changes their policy.
We did majority rules. Maybe we do something at a conference and we can get him on stage or something. They have very specific rules around how that works, but now I know what they are. Maybe we can work that out.
Absolutely.
There was a lot going on. And so 2023 was the year of security convergence. So we saw like a lot of different tool sets start to come into things. So like identity security started to become a term that was out there. We started to see things along the lines of like ITDR and ISPM and sort of precursors, right, to those kind of spaces. And around that point in 2023, we kind of hit 100,000 downloads as a show. It's like, oh, it was like a major milestone for us. I think I put one of the few times I put like a social graphic on Twitter or something at the time around, celebrating that. And we actually were self-funded throughout that entire time. And then we started to do sponsored episodes, to help with the costs of running, the episodes and show and stuff like that. And believe it or not, our top episode in 2023 was a sponsor spotlight episode with Sunray or Sunry.
Was that our first sponsor? Or no, I'm sorry. No, it wasn't our first, but Sunry did come back and do a second one as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think people were interested to learn more about other identity security tools in the space, right? It wasn't IGA. It wasn't PAM. It wasn't another IDP. It was something else. And there was definitely an appetite for people to kind of learn about that. And, it helped us, right? Helps me pay the costs for running this thing.
Pretty sure our first sponsored episode was Conductor One with Alex Bovee.
That sounds right. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big turning point for the podcast. We were still not doing video at that point, I think. I think we started video in 2024, but I think we started experimenting with video by the end of 23, but we weren't sure if this was something we wanted to commit to, right? But then at the beginning of 24, we made the announcement. I think Convergence was a big thing that year. I think a lot of these new technology spaces, and I remember as a consultant thinking, I'm concerned with making a recommendation about something that's new to my clients, right? Because what if that becomes unimportant or kind of kicked to the curb? Remember we were talking about UBA all the time, like user behavior analytics. It's not even a space that people refer to anymore. And I'm not saying that it doesn't exist at all. But what I'm saying is it's not making any headlines. So if we're making big recommendations like, hey, you need to do this thing, because the promise was there. And I think a lot of what you're seeing happening with ITDR is dependent on, recognizing a user's normal behavior, knowing when they're doing something that breaks that mold, and then taking action on it, doing a response. So they were on the right track. But if you went out and told your clients hey, you need to be on this UBA thing, you could have mud on your face later.
Yeah. It's really kind of an evolutionary thing. It's where I've said this before, where I think ITDR started as user behavior analytics, or if you wanted to use user and entity behavior analytics, right, is another thing. It's kind of evolved into that. While you were talking, I went and looked it up. Sunry was our first sponsored episode. We did that December 13th with Sandy Bird, which was a fun one. We had a great conversation. And then we started to do more and more of those. And, I think the one thing that's been nice about those sponsor spotlight episodes is, and this is something that I have learned over the years of doing this, there are way too many technology companies for me to even keep up with. It used to be manageable. Oh yeah, I know all the IGA players. Not anymore. There's just too many of them, and new ones are popping up every week. Same thing for PAM. IDP is a little bit more mature, but occasionally I'll see a new IDP type solution. But now you've got things like ISPM, ITDR. What was the one that we talked about? Intent-based access control. We talked about with Gal from Plain ID. That'll be coming up in an episode. Stuff like that. There's always something new. And for all the sponsors that have been, we're grateful for them for donating and helping us, keep the show afloat and running. It's been a really learning opportunity for me to also say, okay, our normal episodes, vendor neutral. We don't pitch product. We don't even advertise what we do. A lot of people think that we are podcasters 100% of the time, when it couldn't be further from the truth. We've been identity consultants the whole time, and we've maybe done too good of a job of hiding the fact, which I guess is a good thing. It's hey, this is vendor neutral. You're not getting punched in the face every 3 minutes with buy a mattress, or, here's a protein shake, or, buy our services, stuff like that. But it's been nice to be able to kind of take the gloves off on those sponsor episodes and ask questions. Tell me about your product. Very similar to going up to a booth at a conference, or, hey, some salesperson reaches out and say, hey, can we show you our product for 45 minutes, right? And tell us about it. So, it's been a great way for me to keep up with that. And I think people have enjoyed that as well, judges based on episode numbers. Our sponsor episodes do just as well as our quote unquote normal episodes.
Yeah. I think I was sometimes you think there's going to be resistance. I thought there'd be resistance from our sponsors, like, hey, I'm donating for this 45 minutes, right? I want to talk about my product the whole time. That's absolutely not been the way it's gone. Pretty much everyone who's come on the show, and I shouldn't say pretty much, I think it's 100% of our sponsors are like, we want to do a regular episode, but we want to mention our product and like how we do it. But you guys have a formula that works. The formula that works is like, it's not a infomercial. It's educational. Hopefully it's entertaining. Hopefully, with the sponsored episodes, it's like people get to go on, say, this is something I want to do further investigation on. I'm going to reach out to this company, or they can watch and be like, yeah, I'm glad I listened to this. They don't have my email address. They're not going to be bugging me. I don't have it. This doesn't scratch the itch that I have.
I mean, it's perfectly put. No notes. All right. So 2023 was also like a lot of convergence, right? I mentioned like the security tooling, stuff like that. It feels like 2024 was a lot of like privileged access management stuff, protecting the keys to the kingdom, those kinds of ideas. Our top episode that year was episode 294, Navigating Privileged Access Management. And, there was just a lot of growth that year. I think we started to hit more conferences. We went from like 100,000 to, I think by the time 2024 was done, we were already over like 400,000. So we had like a 400% growth in that year in downloads. And I think a lot of it was, being at conferences and people starting to pick up on stuff like that. But it seemed for whatever reason, like PAM was 2024's theme.
Yeah. I mean, here's one thing about the podcast, right? Is that we try to keep our pulse on everything that's going on, keep a pulse of everything that's going on. So we had episodes in 24 about customer IAM, about IGA, and also the newer technologies. Privileged access management, I think, kept coming up, or is probably, if you had to pick a theme, that's what it would be, because of the breaches. It's like what was happening in the world at that time is like companies were getting exposed, ending up on the front page, becoming the top story on CNBC because they got breached and they either paid a ransom or, their business got shut down. And usually if you tie those all the way back, the bad guys got their hands on a privileged credential and were able to overtake some pretty important infrastructure and maybe shut the company down. So decision makers, senior people were willing to invest in solutions that kind of help prevent those things from happening.
Yeah. Again, I think a little bit of like cleanup from prior years. We saw like a lot of MFA adoption in the pandemic years, and it's like, okay, we've got that solved. We think we've got authentication good enough. Now let's start to look at things elsewhere.
Yeah. I mean, I think you're right on with that. It's like there's the cleanup, and we spend time talking about like, hey, for the practitioners that are out there and you're breaking your axe trying to fix these problems, like we have episodes that are dedicated to that. I mean, over the years, we've done episodes on role-based access control. It's not sexy, right? And we've been doing it since before we were doing podcasts, but it's still something that practitioners in the field are breaking their axe, like implementing. But at the same time, we'll have somebody like Ian Glazer come on and he'll talk about zero standing privileges. So it's like, okay, this is interesting because now we're talking about what's coming next, right? And a lot of times it's like, some companies, it's here's what's happening now. But for a lot of us who are the practitioners and breaking our axe in the world, it's to listen to somebody like Ian or an Eve or somebody like that who's talking about, hey, these are the things that are up next.
Yeah. And I think sometimes what you end up seeing a lot of conference talks are sort of like the future. And so it takes time for those concepts to filter into the real world, right? Not many companies can afford to be bleeding edge on 100% of all IAM functions across the board. Like they have to pick and choose. And so they say, okay, well, this year we're going to try and tackle IGA and we're going to work on that for the next 18 months to 3 years, right? Whatever it looks like. And then it's like, okay, we've got some breathing room now there. Let's improve our PAM. And then let's go back to authentication and start working on passkeys and replacing, legacy MFA, right? Things like that. And so as much as you go to conferences and you hear about all these great ideas and they're needed because they have to start somewhere, it takes a while for, businesses to catch up to that.
That's right.
So 2024, privilege access. 2025 was really about frictionless authentication. So what I mean by that is we saw a lot more uptake in like passkeys, improving user experiences, identifying, who people are when they need to get something done, whether it's, calling a help desk or whatever it may be. Our top episode was the one we did with Ori from Trusona, so episode 360. That will always be a memorable one for me because, one, Ori is a great speaker. He's entertaining in his own right. He's just a very interesting guy. They have, a very interesting product. It's a good product. It works. And, he's put up money. Like this is the first time we ever had like a sponsor say, come break our stuff. I won't use that word. Come break our stuff. If you can find a hole in it, there's a $10,000 bug bounty for that. That's the first time anybody has ever come on the show, like put their money where their mouth was. And so I think it was for like a month they ran this. And as far as I'm aware, nobody was able to break it. You could have won $10,000 and a slide whistle from Ori. That was a lot of fun, right? And I think that kind of shows like, hey, there is a need here for identity verification for a bunch of different things and come poke holes in it. And I hope that we get more opportunities like that in the future to be able to kind of have some more fun with that, but address like real problems like that.
Yeah. No, I mean, one of the cool things that you're right is like that you and I get to do because of the podcast, meeting people like Ori, getting the behind the scenes look at the technology that he has. I was like, man, why didn't somebody invent this like 15, 20 years ago when, I was doing end user support and you could see like, hey, this person says they're calling from California, but they're really in Vietnam because I can look on the map and see physically where they're located. So that was cool. But I thought 2025 was like, I don't know. I felt like it was the year of identity at the center. The podcast really took off this year, or
almost 1 million downloads. Yeah.
1 million downloads almost in 1 year. That's mind blowing. I hope we can at least duplicate that this year, if not do better. I think you're right. The frictionless authentication was huge. I think there's just so much stuff happening in the space. I think, the industry was starting to say, all right, we've been talking about for a while, like, zero trust, and every product was more zero trust. And now it started to become in 25 with AI. So is AI for IAM. I think we're just going to see more and more of that.
Yeah. I mean, definitely like, AI has kind of taken over the last year. It's been a thread, I think, through every conversation we've had for the last year or so. And so let's kind of wrap this up with like 2026 is the year of what? It's February when this episode comes out. We've got a handful of episodes. It seems to me like agentic identity is going to be like the theme for this year. What do you think?
I think it is, to the point that when we do the 500th episode, it's going to seem like, it's so obvious. I think the agentic AI is moving so fast, and now AI is able to write its own code that I think organizations are going to start replatforming applications in such a way that it's going to go fast. And maybe replatforming isn't even what's going to happen. Maybe it's just that organizations, we used to do build versus buy analysis in IT like 20, 25 years ago. And that got to the point where it was like, who the heck would ever build their own IT applications? I'm seeing a resurgence of it. I'm seeing organizations, my clients, build applications in AI. Why? Because they can build them way cheaper than they can buy them. This need to have AI built in, IAM built into them. You can't just forget about the security. So the thing is, it's moving so fast. I don't know what it's going to look like, 12 months out, much less, 2-3 years out. I mean,
it's hard to predict anything in this space. So one thing I've learned over the years is like, just when you think you're getting comfortable and like, oh, I kind of got a handle on it. Nope. Something new comes along and pulls it out. It's part of it. But, AI is just that thing. It'll be another thing. Episode 500. Well, I think so. It's another tool that we're grappling with to figure out how to leverage it, how to secure it, how to use it in any number of ways, both good and bad. It will just become, like the calculator or the internet or other things. It's going to be very disruptive, and we just got to figure out how to work with it. It's not like it's going away. Like that cat is out of the bag.
Yeah, I just don't know if it's like just another revolution or it's like the revolution. I mean, from things I've been hearing and researching, and I listen to a lot of podcasts, especially about AI, is, especially like, it seems like Anthropic and Claude are the ones that get pointed to the most in terms of its ability to just write really good code. And it's just going to take a lot of jobs away from developers, and then it's going to be able to write applications 24 hours a day. I mean, people can't do that. People can't work 24 hours a day. So if it's already starting to do that now, where's it going to be a year, 2 years, 3 years from now?
Well, it's like anything else. It's going to continue to mature. It'll become cheaper, more capable, and we will have found new and exciting ways to secure and unsecure things with it.
Yeah.
There will be something else, right? I guess it's hard for me to call it the disruptor when you're in the moment. It is a disruptor, but so was the internet. So was, a calculator. So was indoor plumbing, right? There's so many of these things that come along in your lifetime. I do think it is going to be very disruptive. It already is, but we're going to have to figure out how to coexist with it. It's not going to go away. And so we have to figure out, how do you make it secure? How do you make it usable for people? How do you try to put guardrails or, train tracks, maybe in certain cases where, people are only doing the things with it that you want them to do? That's the kind of situation I think that we're in right now.
Yeah, it could be. You and I were talking about this before the show, and I was thinking, man, we should have hit record. That happens so often with you and I, and even with our guests. Like, we get to having side conversations like, darn it, we should have hit record. But we were talking about how fast it's moving, and the thing everyone always points to, Will Smith eating spaghetti. Mm-hmm. You just have to watch
the benchmark for any maturity. That should be like all of our IM maturities is, where are you on the Will Smith eating spaghetti scale?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So if you haven't seen that already, look it up. It's pretty hilarious with like comparing that. And it's a AI generated video of Will Smith eating spaghetti. And then one that's,
and that's not code for anything. That's like literally what it is. Right?
Yeah,
You're not
right.
Speaking
exactly.
in code. Like it is exactly what it says on the tin.
Yeah. Will Smith, the actor, and he's eating spaghetti. And then they show like him doing it, like a video generated of him doing it now. And I don't even think it's now as in, February of 2026. I think it was like sometime 2025, like the current video. And it's like, oh my gosh, you can barely tell this is AI generated.
Yeah.
That's what I keep thinking. It's like, oh, this is 2026. What's it going to be like in 2030? Like, that's 4 years from now. That's nothing.
Mm-hmm. Going to be more capable, going to be more realistic. We're going to have to figure out ways to do content authentication and verification. And
talk about AGI stuff. And they say AI is going to be smarter than any person on the planet. And that's like 3 to say 8 years away, that AI will be smarter than any person on the planet. And then they talk about artificial superintelligence, I guess ASI or AGSI. And that's where AI reaches the point it's smarter than the collective knowledge of everybody on the planet. I mean, when it gets to that point, do you think it's really going to need a human to tell it what to do? Or is it just going to know what it needs to do and do it? And that humans just really won't be able to add value to that process. I think when we were talking earlier, you said, well, the creativity. And I definitely would have agreed. Like, I think if you think about where AI is now, you definitely reach the limits of its creativity sometimes. But I've seen it got a lot better in, say, the last year. But that's looking at it like where it's at now. I think that, it's not just random number generator. It's going to actually, like, I'm constantly shocked. Like I was talking about with writing this book. I asked it to come up with things, and sometimes it's just not very creative. But I just think it's just a point in time of where AI is at.
Like I said, it'll just get more capable, and we'll just have to figure it out. I think AI is going to become more personal too. So rather than having like these generic models that are like everybody, is you'll have your own little sort of like personal AI that you lean on. And, some of us are probably already doing some of that, right? Whether you're doing like your own gems and Gemini, or your own little GPTs and ChatGPT, or spaces and Claude, right? Or using Notebook LM, whatever it may be. I think there will be a personal touch that will make it, the idea is that will make it more enhancing of someone's life. So I'm in a beta right now with Gmail for this thing called CC. And every morning I get an email that is like a summary of all the things that are happening in my Gmail and my calendar. And it's nice. It's like having a little assistant. It's like, oh yeah, I forgot about that. I have to take care of that. And it's just every morning I just get this brief and I can respond to it as a person. Just reply to the email and say, oh yeah, remind me about this. Or yeah, can you look that up? And just come back to it later and treat it as like an offline agent, type approach. Is it perfect? No. But I think stuff like that it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out, because there's going to be some people who are going to be willing to place that trust into it and some people who aren't, and that's fine. We have to figure out where do those roads meet and intersect.
Yeah, I think those choices get taken away after a while. I think, look, like self-driving cars, that's, I don't think you'll be able to buy a car that you drive and people will stop knowing how to drive a car. Just get into a car, tell it where they want to go. The car will take them there. That's not far away at all, right? That's already being done. I think there's going to be robots. I think 5 years, at least, or minimum 10 years, you'll see robots walking on the street, and you'll go into places like the grocery store and robots will be working in the grocery store. So it's going to change our physical world for sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's not. It definitely will. We're really like pontificating and waxing poetic here.
Yeah.
I don't have any answers. I just know that we're going to have to do what humans have had to do forever: adapt.
That's right.
Fire, hammer, Bronze Age, plagues, pandemics, going to the moon, if you believe in that, right? Things like that, right? We've had to adapt, and that is what humans are really good at: adaptability. Generally speaking,
I think identity has adapted.
Yeah,
identity has to follow the technology, right?
It has to. You can't do it any other way. I mean, look at what we're doing right now in the US with mobile identity and driver's license, right? We've got a little less than, I think, half of the states are coming online this year. A couple of years ago it was half of that. Before that was half of that. So it takes time for these things to all catch up, but eventually we get there, and then we figure out, okay, what's next? What thing do we have to solve for?
Jeff, I'm looking forward to the next 100 episodes and maybe 500 after that.
Yeah, I'm thinking 500 is probably sometime in 2028, based on our current run rate of like somewhere between like 65 and 70 episodes a year, roughly.
It's been a fantastic ride to be on with you, man. So I always express my gratitude to our sponsors and to our listeners, but I've got a lot of gratitude to you because you and I have been doing this consistently, have been good friends now for longer than we've been doing the podcast. But, when you do something like this, like there's times where the other person does something that annoys you, right?
Yep.
And that happens on both ends, and we always get past it, maintain our friendship. And I hope that comes through in the podcast. I hope people know that we appreciate each other and that we are friends. And, sometimes we get into our debates about identity or whatever it might be. We always come out and we're still friends.
Because we talk. That simple.
Yeah. We got to get more people in this world to do that.
Yeah. Is what it is. I don't want to turn political, but yeah, we couldn't be more opposite, and somehow we still make it work, and it's good. So
there you go.
Let us be the shining example for the world. Let's put it that way.
We are the world.
I'm going to isolate that, and that might be the part of the clip for this episode. Anytime you sing,
you're talking over me, though.
I always, but see, I'm recording isolated tracks, so I can totally steal that.
Gosh. All right. There we go.
Let's go ahead and leave it for this week. Thanks again to everybody who supported us over the 400 episodes. Here's to the next 400. Find us on the web, idacpodcast.com. Like, subscribe, use our discount codes. They're always on our main page for idacpodcast.com. That helps us continue to grow the show and bring more content. And, thanks to everyone for the ride that we've been on and the ride that we're going to continue to go on. So thanks everybody for watching and or listening, and we'll talk with y'all in the next one.
You've been listening to Identity at the Center. We hope you've enjoyed the show. Make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. But in the meantime, hit the website at identityatthecenter.com. See you next time on Identity at the Center.